It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Gidget Pryor. Gidget has worked as a network administrator, program developer, database administrator, analyst, business intelligence consultant, and project manager. Presently, she is a solutions engineer and continues to maintain her Microsoft certified trainer and certification credentials. She maintains ongoing experience with many technology areas, including Azure, Office 365, .NET, Windows, and security. Gidget, it's all yours. Let's get started.
All right, thank you, Jim. Welcome, everyone. All right, so our agenda today, these are we're going to go over some questions that we will be answering. We're also going to talk about just preparing the environment in general as you work remote. I personally have worked remote for 20 years, so this hasn't been a huge transition for me, but I do remember as I transitioned to be a remote worker, what that was like. So we'll talk about some of those cultural changes and just the environment that you find yourself in. And then we'll go through our 5 M's. We'll look at managing remote teams. So if you are a manager, how do you manage those remote teams, or if you're a team lead, or if you're just participating in a team, what's going to be different in terms of your culture, your productivity. We'll also look at just some logistics that need to be considered as you mobilize. Motivate. What skills do you need? You know, as you move to a remote environment, you may find yourself needing to learn something like making your headset work because you're going to be collaborating with other people across the internet, or you may need a webcam, or you may need to be able to reset your modem, things that if you're in IT, you're probably familiar with that. If you're not in IT, you may or may not have had any experience with that. So in preparation for this webinar, I did talk to a lot of different people in different roles, just friends of mine as they have transitioned, friends that have, you know, 4 or 5 children at home that they're trying to homeschool at the same time that they're working on this. So we'll talk about some of those things. So how can your teams collaborate? What technologies are going to be involved? So as you modernize, or you may need to update some of the equipment that you have at your home. And then just some practical things on risks. What are the risks regarding security and continuity, both from an individual perspective as well as an IT perspective? So some questions that we will be answering throughout the webinar. We're going to look first at what you should consider as you transition to remote work. And some of these will be throughout the presentation. We will address them in multiple ways. How can individuals and teams continue to be productive? What changes? What's going to be the same? So what technology changes will you experience, and what things will be just business as usual? What should you consider about your internet connection, about your speed, your bandwidth, and security? A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in my office and I was about to give a presentation, and my internet connection went completely down. And I thought, oh, it's okay, I'll call IT. Well, it's the information I had to be able to contact them was different. So I was like, uh-oh, I hope it comes back up pretty soon, because there are people waiting on me, and I didn't have a good plan B. So in addition, we'll look at some networking factors that are important and should be considered. So as you prepare, you want to consider your environment and your culture. So establishing your workspace, if at all possible, it would be a good idea to have a consistent workspace. If you have a separate office, that's ideal, but some place that is your dedicated area that you're going to be working. Preparing yourself and your family. I know this is especially tricky if you have a lot of people in your family that are also home at this time, and they are also trying to work from home, and you're also trying to take care of your kids. But establishing some boundaries, you know, closing your door. And if you are, as like I am, giving a presentation, even putting a note on the door that says on air or please do not disturb, just as a visual reminder to people of those boundaries. Also, establishing a schedule. I know it can be tempting to get distracted and not keep your regular work hours. Either you're working too many hours because after all, you're eating dinner and you hear the email bell ring. And so you're going back into your office. So establishing some good boundaries for yourself and for your family. Also, your work relationships may be changing at this time, new ways of interacting with people. If you have sat next to someone for the last 5 years and you just would get up and go walk to their desk and have a conversation, you will be having that conversation in a different way now, either through email, through chat, maybe across Teams or WebEx, various types of technologies. Preparing your technology. Get used to being perhaps on video for meetings. Have in mind what you actually look like on the video. Maybe you want to start it on one machine and you want to view it on a different machine to make sure that the angle doesn't look strange as people are interacting with you. Audio, checking your audio, making sure that you have a good headset, make sure that you have something that is noise canceling. Obtaining the right equipment for even simple things like a stapler, scissors, a hole punch. If you don't have a printer, maybe you have to get a printer. The paper. How will you have just simple things at your fingertips? In addition to establishing a dedicated space, you also should make your workspace a place that you want to be. So I like for things to be very organized. Right at the moment, my desk is a bit more cluttered, actually a lot more cluttered than I want it to be. It helps me think. If I have a clean desk, I'm not thinking about all of this junk that's on my desk. I'm thinking about my actual work, and it allows me to focus. So make it a space that you want it to be and establish a place that is separate from everyone else if at all possible. Establishing good work habits. I think this one is tricky, especially if you are just going home for the first time to work from home. Get up, get dressed, do the things that you would normally do if you were actually going to your office. Eat breakfast, get dressed, have consistent work hours. Knowing yourself is very important in this. I am an extreme introvert, which is kind of interesting because I was an instructor for so long. I definitely am not antisocial, but I just gain my energy by being alone. It helps me to have a quiet space where I can think. But I have some friends right now that are really struggling. They are extreme extroverts. They are used to having lots of conversations with people all day long. They are used to interacting all the time. So if you find yourself in one of those places, understanding what your particular needs are, make sure that you take breaks. Get out of your office, go have lunch. I have to force myself to go in the other room to have lunch, to regroup, and come back to my office. Most of the time, to be honest, I end up eating at my desk, which is not the best habit. So considering what your style is, separate your work and your personal time. When you are working, it's time to work. When you are with your family, it's time to be with your family. Don't let all of that blend. And again, that goes back to good boundaries. Establish your daily plan. What do you plan to accomplish? And then making sure that you have accomplished that. Many years ago, I took the Stephen Covey, right? I think it was Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I took a week-long class on that. And one of the things that he didn't have in his curriculum, but the person that was facilitating, one thing that she taught me that I have used ever since then, and this was probably 25 years ago or something, is that when you create a list, as you achieve something on that list, instead of crossing it off, highlight it. It helps you see what you have done and what you have accomplished. It's an encouragement rather than, okay, well, I got that out of the way and that out of the way. And then it feels like all you're doing is just trying to cross things off your list. Highlight the good work that you're doing. Think about how your schedule impacts other coworkers. One weekend after I took this role, so it's been about a year ago, it was the weekend and I sent my boss an email thinking he would respond to me on Monday. When he responded to me within just minutes after I sent the email, I felt terrible. I was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to be interrupting your weekend. And he said, no, you can send what you want when you want, and I'll respond to it when I have an opportunity. I just happen to have an opportunity. But you're sending signals to other people. If you're always answering emails at 9 o'clock at night, especially if you're a manager, what message are you sending to your team? Are you expecting them to be answering email at 9 o'clock at night? Because it does send kind of an unspoken message of some type. People can interpret that different ways. So think about how your schedule impacts your coworkers or maybe people that you manage or your manager. All right, if you are a manager, how should you manage remote teams differently? At one time, I was a manager, but I have never managed remote teams. People were allowed to occasionally work from home, but for the most part, we were in the office. So I asked some of my managers that have managed me over the last several years and managers that I know that are currently managing remote teams and got some advice from them. Things that they mentioned were to hold regular team meetings to help people feel connected. Some people need more connection than others. It's just the reality of different personalities. Establishing a one-on-one time, or at least making yourself available if people need you or have questions. And people may be just feeling anxious at this time and they just want to talk. They just want to talk about business, maybe the business continuity, or just things that are concerning to them personally. So making yourself available for that. Also collaborating with each other, establishing new ways to collaborate, whether it's video, whether it's audio, whether it's over chat, email, different things that you can do. I read, because there's so much right now on working remote, so many articles and webinars and things that are being offered. I went and viewed some of them. There were some funny examples that I wouldn't really recommend. One of them said, establish a dress-up day where your team all gets dressed up and you connect. I thought, I don't really imagine myself doing that, but there were some pretty funny examples. And actually, this article was very serious. That was a serious recommendation, not one that I really would personally recommend. Facilitating the transition for your team. Set expectations for them. Help them know what is expected of them from work. So I spent many years as an instructor and I had a very regular schedule, right? It's time for me to log in, to give a presentation. We set a lunch schedule. When we were done with lunch, we come back. It was a very set schedule, something I just didn't even have to think about. When I transitioned into this role, there was a day, and I had been working a lot of extra hours because I was working on a big project. And there was a day that I just asked my boss, I said, look, I have to run some errands at lunch, and I think it might take me an hour and a half or so to do that. Would you like for me to take time off? Do you want me to put in for time off? And he said, no, of course not. So setting those expectations with your people about what you do and don't expect from them. How will you know if they're getting their work done? And trusting people, letting them know that you trust them to get their work done. Support education for people. Maybe they don't know how to really work with this new equipment, which is maybe not complicated equipment, but they've never been on a webcam before. They just don't know how to do that. So supporting your team in that. Some people are better at time management than others. So if they're not good at time management, or they need some technical training, or perhaps they have to prepare some presentations now because of the way that you're collaborating, maybe you give them some PowerPoint training or some time management, just giving your team support. So logistics that need to be considered, we talked about some of this already. As you Mobilize, as you move away from the office, what do you need to consider? Workspace is certainly one of them. Noise level is another. You know, you may be on mute and have your children running around your feet, but then somebody asks you a question and you've got to consider the noise level that's going to be in the background and the distraction of that. Cybersecurity is, of course, a consideration. We're going to look at that in a later section. We also want to think about just equipment that you're going to need. The equipment that you use probably should be equipment that has been issued by your company. Perhaps it is, as my laptop, it is a laptop that automatically connects to a VPN, providing some additional protection. The patches are automatically done on my computer. So considering that, your internet connection is a consideration. Then we also have security considerations, patching, those types of things are more important now. All right, what new skills will you need, or what skills will be different than they were? I mentioned some of this already, time management. It certainly is different for you to set your own schedule and to make sure that you do have regular work hours, that you are getting to the office on time, that you are leaving on time at a reasonable time. You may feel that, as a friend of mine said a week ago, I was in a meeting with him and I said, how are you doing? Because he has 4 small children at home. I actually have 3 friends that have 4 small children at home, and they're trying to homeschool and they're trying to, both people work from home. Both parents are working from home as well. And I said, how are you managing? And he said, I'm managing in 30-second intervals. And I'm sure it feels like that to some of you. You know, for me, it's just me and it's quiet here and it's business as usual. But I know that's not the case. So how will you structure your time differently? And just accepting that, you know, some of it is out of your control. You may want a very, very regular work schedule, but you may have to just say, every hour I'll tell my family that I'll be out for 10 minutes. I will come and talk to them, but they've got to let me focus at the rest of the time. Organizational skills, you know, keeping a clean desk, keeping your list of things to do in order. Your company, how will your company communicate to you? So if there are IT notices that go out, there's some security risk that has occurred, there's some messaging around you know, how business is being managed differently now. For us, a lot of our classes that were classroom classes, they switched over to virtual. And so how did we manage that transition? How did we just keep those codes in the system and switch them over? Because our virtual classroom has a different code than a physical classroom. So just managing that, making sure that people knew that they weren't going to be traveling. This is, you know, even before the travel ban, that we had implemented some of those things. IT skills. How will IT support you? How will you communicate with them? We do have at Global Knowledge, we have an instructor help desk and we also have a student help desk. And so the volume of their calls, I haven't talked to them, but I'm sure that the volume of their calls has gone up as people have gone to virtual classes. They want to make sure that they can get logged in, or maybe they can't see their pass, or maybe they can't get to their curriculum and they're trying to figure out how to do that because they would have done it differently if they'd attended in a physical room. Had an interesting case study because my current role is as a solutions engineer. And so we often go into companies and they'll say, we need you to help us develop a training path for you know, for our people as we have transitioned over. So a very large healthcare company, like a hospital system, contacted us and they said, we need a lot of training right now. Even though we are so busy, we've got to have help. And we said, okay, so we were trying to learn about the need, and they said, we've got people that are doing desktop support that would be their normal job, but we're caught up on desktop support. But what we don't have is enough people to help us analyze the data that's coming in as we get new cases, as we are trying to figure out logistically how to shift things around in our healthcare system. So we need the people that are extra, not really extra, but the people that are not so busy as desktop support. We need them to transition over and become business analysts. The problem is they don't have any idea how to be a business analyst. So we need to know the shortest path to get them up and going. What classes does Global Knowledge have that you can offer to them to make them into a business analyst? And the person that was a business analyst, because they are familiar with questions and asking data, we need them to learn to do the user interface, to understand what would be intuitive as someone is working on a new web page that we're designing. So it was really very interesting. So that we made a business plan for them, a training plan for them for about 80 people. So they had some temporary roles, and they know that they're going to go back to it, but they're trying to immediately retrain these people. So you may have some things that have to shift in your organization. People have to learn new things. All right, so what technology do you need to consider? We've talked about some of it, but you may have to consider something like WebEx. I have customer calls all the time, and we have some customers, we use Teams at Global Knowledge, but we have some customers that they can't use Teams, they have trouble with that in their environment, so they use WebEx instead. So will you use WebEx or Teams or Google or Zoom or Adobe Connect? You know, what will you be using for your collaboration? What will you be using to be able to communicate with each other? And they each have, like all pieces of software, they each have their benefits and they have their downsides as well. As far as communication, email, of course, chat. It may be tempting to just, instead of sending an email and waiting, to just ping someone and chat with them. But it may not be convenient for them to just immediately answer you. So I had somebody that sent me a chat a couple of weeks back, and he said, hi. And I said, hi. And then it was silent for about 30 minutes. And I was back involved in what I was doing. And I got another hi. So I responded back and said, hi. We never did end up having the communication. I have no idea what he wanted. So if you're going to instant message someone, maybe getting to the point, if it's something that can wait, perhaps you do send it in an email and wait for them to respond. All right, what new, oh, sorry, I wasn't finished with that. What new desktop skills might someone need? We just open up the chat. I saw some things flashing up here, so I was just looking for that. Okay. All right. So what new desktop skills might someone need? They may have not had to use a piece of software before, but now it's something that they will need, so they'll need some training or help with that. Even getting connected to the internet. I was talking to a friend of mine that she is working from home right now, and she said that it's hard for her because she hasn't had a computer for a while, and she hasn't had an internet connection for a while, and now she is waiting for someone to come and get that connected for her. So she's trying to do her work on a phone, which is a big problem and a hassle for her. Networking and security, making sure that you are following best practices, that you are making sure that you are on a VPN, making sure that you are following what your company has asked you to do. Try to stay away from things like free Wi-Fi. IT support, how will you connect? If you can't connect over the internet, I actually live in the area where Hurricane Michael hit. And so for about 60 days, we didn't have phone service through Verizon. And so I got an AT&T phone after about 2 weeks, and we didn't have, I didn't have internet connection for about 3 months. But at the time that Hurricane Michael hit, I was an instructor and I was expected to be able to lecture. So I had to have internet connection. So for a while, I left and I went to Alabama, and then I went to Georgia, because the hotels in Alabama were too expensive because they were so close to where Hurricane Michael hit. So I worked from a hotel for a few weeks, and then I came back because internet connection had come back to a different part of the city. But every day I was getting up and I was driving 45 minutes to someone else's house and using their internet so that I wasn't having to pay for a hotel. So it just, there are some logistics that you end up considering that maybe you never thought about before. What will you do if your internet goes down? Can you connect with your phone? I keep now, because of that experience, I keep an AT&T phone that can work for me as a mobile hotspot if my regular internet goes down. Doesn't happen a lot, but if it goes down, I am able to still connect. All right, what are some of the risks? All right, some risks we've got. Phishing. I saw an article yesterday that said phishing in the last couple of weeks is up 667%, so almost 700% of fake emails, fake phone calls, things saying, you can get your stimulus check faster. And so you want to be really careful about that. Be diligent, use common sense. Don't fall for something that is, it sounds like it's too good to be true, because it probably is. So just be careful as you open or click or respond to emails. Devices, making sure that you're using company issued devices that have been armed with some protective measures on them. Wi-Fi, staying away from free Wi-Fi. It might be tempting to just be able to go somewhere, like before restaurants were shut down, you might have wanted to go to Starbucks and just hang out with some other people that you work with or other people that you know and do some of your work from there. Not really an option right now, but just staying away from free Wi-Fi, conducting your work on a secure network. Patching, IT departments especially need to be diligent to keep up with this right now, because there are extra security vulnerabilities that can occur. People have a lot of time on their hands. There's a lot of people that are not working. There's a lot of hackers already. Traffic monitoring, IT and cyber pros need to be really vigilant about monitoring traffic, looking at patterns that are different than maybe what we have previously noticed or seen, understanding what was the norm and what does traffic look like now and what's the meaning of that. So really taking time to analyze that traffic. Vendors and contractors, one way that hackers can get in is if they know that your vendors have some vulnerability and your vendors are interacting with you. So understanding what your vendors are doing, being aware of how they're handling their network. How are they making sure they're not vulnerable to attacks? All right, so wrapping up, let's go ahead and take some questions. I think I saw that there were a couple of questions in the chat. Yeah, okay, so good question. How do you ensure the user's machines are fully patched to avoid exploitation of an app vulnerability? You mentioned also the use of secure VPN. Does this eliminate the use of personal devices? Yeah, so personal devices are a problem. People answering things on their apps, that's one of the reasons that your IT department needs to be especially careful and put some policies in place about what is and is not acceptable, because it's really impossible to be 100% protected, but certainly things that you can do. How do you also ensure internal threats are monitored now that most network security AI tools cannot scan remote sessions? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Let's see, Norbert, I tell you what, I'm going to let me just put this in the chat here. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat for you. And if you will send me an email with that question, I'll be glad to get an answer from one of our cybersecurity people. So I do some security, but I don't know the answer to that last part of your question. Okay, so hey Gidget, what are the pros and cons of using Zoom cloud meetings? There's been a storm around it. Could you explain in easy terms? Yeah, there have been a lot of issues around Zoom. I'm just going to pull up something here while we're talking. Okay, so one of the, and I'm not sure that this is valid. This is just the conversation around it. Okay, I haven't dug very much into it myself, but so it says the Zoom documentation claims that the app uses AES 256 encryption, but they found that a single AES 128 key was used. So they said that's not recommended because the patterns present the plain text preserved during encryption. So that's one of the conversations around it. So the criticism around them is that their video is not secure. So it says there's a screen sharing feature concern, Zoom sharing data with Facebook. These are just the accusations around them. So I'm not sure where that is going to end up. For remote users, the home network is not fully secure compared to the office network that have firewalls and network segmentation. So despite the official laptop has a VPN, how can one prevent session hijacking by a hacker? Again, I would go back to your IT group and ask what the policies are around that. And some of it just, the reality is we are more vulnerable on our home networks. So it is a big issue.
Hey Gidget, this is Jim. There's a
Hi.
couple questions over in the chat screen. Let's see. Rebecca is asking about using PDFs for routing signatures. That's probably in relation to something you were talking about a few minutes ago.
PDF for routing signatures. Can you say more about that, Rebecca?
While we're waiting on Rebecca, Edouard also brought up Cisco Jabber and what was the other one? And VPN Tunnel. I assume those were in relation to other options for collaboration. I'm not sure if you have any comments around those, but it seems like, yeah, just in comparison to Zoom or WebEx or other platforms. And while we're waiting, I can throw out that, yeah, I mean, please throw your questions in the Q&A box. We still have some time for Gidget to answer some questions. There have been a few questions around the recording and the slides. Those will be sent to all attendees. You'll receive an email based on the email you registered with. So yeah, the recording and the slides will be provided to everybody. And it looks like we have a response from Rebecca. Gidget.
Okay. Oh, okay. Looking for ways to get multiple signatures where formerly routed around a paper copy. So I just shared my email address. If you have questions that I'm not able to answer, Jabber, back to the other question. So Rebecca, I don't know the answer for you. What would be a good solution for that? But I can ask one of the people on my team that would be able to answer that or get an answer for you. Certainly don't want to leave anything unanswered. Jabber is a free instant messaging service that's based on the extensible messaging presence protocol. So it is a way of communicating. I don't know of a lot of businesses that are using Jabber, but I just may not, be aware of them. I see a lot of people using Teams for instant message. Skype still around a little bit. Officially discontinued, but. Oh, okay. So I got a message saying you can't see my email address. It's just gidget.pryor@globalknowledge.com. So it's GIDGET.pryor@globalknowledge.com.
And that appears to be the end of the questions, Gidget. So
Okay.
if no one else has anything they want to post, and I'll keep an eye on this here for the next moment. I'll go ahead and get a few more pieces of information to share with everybody, but then we'll just close down the webinar and you can all get a few more minutes in our day. But first off, thank you, Gidget. It was a great webinar. I hope everyone who attended enjoyed today's webinar. We encourage you to stay connected with Global Knowledge. You can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn using these handles.
Yeah, and so Jim, I was going to talk to them about there is a free course that you can still get registered for if you're interested. Global Knowledge is offering a free course on managing remote teams. So it is free through the end of May. It is, there's the link for it, but it's called Managing Remote Teams.
All right, thank you, Gidget.
A second, if you want to copy that down.
Completely forgot about that piece. Go ahead.
Okay. And then these are just some recommended courses based on the things that we talked about. So as far as a business skills set, things on managing remote teams. So that's the course we're talking about. Leading in a diverse and inclusive culture. So more from a leadership perspective or time management perspective, protecting your personal time, which is a lot of what we discussed today. Other recommended courses from a Microsoft perspective, Microsoft Teams, if you're using it as an end user, or if you are looking at teamwork, deploying it or managing Microsoft Teams, more of the administrative IT side of that, Microsoft Skype, Office 365 Digital. Cybersecurity, there's a couple of cybersecurity classes. These are not really end user cybersecurity. These would be focused around more of the IT person, the IT professional, and a few things from Cisco also around IT and security. All
All right.
right, and here's our connection information. We would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you personally. So anyone who has questions, or for those questions I was not able to answer, just shoot me an email and I will get you an answer.
Yep. I'm sorry for jumping the gun there,
Oh, that's
Gidget.
okay.
Okay, so we covered all our social connections, but yeah, so we want to give everyone a little help to take the next step. So we have some discount codes. You can get 25% off your next Global Knowledge course. Just use Webinar 25 in the US or CA Webinar 25 in Canada to receive those discounts. Finally, be sure to stay connected with Global Knowledge. You can visit our website at any time to access additional free resources like technical articles, white papers, and other webinars. And that's it for today. Appreciate everyone attending. Thank you. Stay safe and have a great rest of your day.